Hello, I'm the theoliverpickard and welcome to beautiful Limousin, France. Let's talk about car clubs, because I had an interaction with a gentleman not so long ago from a rather prestigious car club who told me that he didn't care about YouTube, he didn't care about young people. In fact, he actively didn't want young people to join the club, young people being me, who is 30. He didn't want young people to join the club. He didn't want young people to buy the cars or drive the cars, and his reasoning for that was that young people would take the cars onto racetracks or drive them in a way that he didn't approve of. I've also been contacted by people driving my own car and making videos with Jolene, telling me that I drive my car too aggressively or fast or in a way that they don't approve of. And this got me thinking about car clubs, because the first gentleman in question, the gentleman who didn't want young people joining the club or didn't approve of me doing YouTube, he was from a car club of a brand that I'm not a big fan of brand loyalty, but it's a brand that doesn't really exist anymore. I'm not going to mention the brand because even negative publicity is still publicity, so I'm actually not going to mention the name of the gentleman, or even the name of the car, or even the name of the car club. But he's from a brand that doesn't exist anymore, and they are cars that I really, really like. I have a strong passion for these vehicles. I absolutely love them. But couldn't stand the man and would never join the club because of the way that he spoke to me and his general demeanour towards me. Which I think is a shame in a way, because I would have really have liked to buy the car in question in the future, and now I won't, because I would need the club for parts and stuff like that. Instead, I would go with another club that were absolutely amazing to me, that make a similar car that I also really love. And so the future of that brand, there's not many people care about that brand, it's a niche brand, and so the future of that brand is looking incredibly shaky, especially considering that me being me and you guys being you guys and you guys watching me, we give the brand a future. You know, we give those cars a future because of the way that, you know, I'm talking to people all over the world and they didn't care, and this gentleman didn't care, and that club doesn't care. So rather than go against a club, you know, go against the grain and fight the system, I'd rather go with a bunch of really nice people who actually want to work with me, who are actually utterly lovely and who really have the time of day for me. I would rather give nice people publicity than negative people anything at all. But this really got me thinking about car clubs, and I asked a lot of you guys, a lot of the viewers, on social media. All my social media, by the way, for all these videos is down below in the description. I've asked you guys over the last few weeks what you think. Would you not buy a car if the culture behind that car or the club behind that car was toxic or negative in any way? Would you would you shy away from certain clubs? Have you shied away from certain clubs? What are your experiences? And by the way, if you don't follow me on social media, if you don't have social media, feel free to share your experiences with me down in the comments below, because these stories I found hugely inspirational. You know, that particular gentleman who, quite frankly, wasn't very nice to me. I don't necessarily mind it, because he was a huge inspiration, and the reason I'm making this video, and it's his own loss and my gain. But a lot of you said, certain brands, and it was actually quite interesting. A lot of you said Porsche. A lot of you would think twice about buying certain sorts of Porsche. A lot of you said Nissan G35s, which is the Nissan Skyline that's the V6 one, and 350Zs. Some of you said Subarus because you don't want to be perceived as a flat brim wearing vapor. It's very interesting, and I also find it interesting that, you know, I have no stake in the game. I'm completely neutral in the fact that I look at cars for what the car is and not the community behind them. but having to associate or being associated by driving that car is very interesting. I find that the way the world perceives us because of the way we're dressed or the way that we drive a certain car or whatever, I find that very interesting. You know, I've mentioned it on this YouTube channel before, I love wearing a suit. I'm a big fan of suits. I'm also a big fan of ripped jeans and a leather jacket. It's kind of my two modes of living, but I'm very aware of the fact that the world perceives me very differently when I'm dressed like this than it does when I wear a suit, even though, let's face it, I look gorgeous either way. So, it was really interesting to hear from a lot of you, and so here are my thoughts. After distilling down everything that everyone said to me and listening and learning, I've come up with some theories of my own. My first theory is that I think there are three main sorts of classic car enthusiasts. Three main sorts of car enthusiasts, never mind classic. There are people who have a nostalgia connection to that car, so they owned that car when they were younger, or it was their hero car, it was their wall poster, whatever you call it, the poster car, it was their what the normal people have on their walls when they were kids, Lamborghini Countach, it was they are nostalgic for their car. It reminds them of a time long gone, and so they feel protective of them, and like they are bastions of that car, and they have to look after that car because it's the thing that they couldn't have when they were kids, and they've always wanted. So then they had when they were kids, and it was taken away from them, or whatever, for whatever reason, and so they feel protective of those cars. The second set are people who have an emotional connection, which is different from nostalgia. So, for example, I have a friend who only loves late 70s and 80s 2CVs. That's all they're interested in. They are a massive automotive enthusiast, but they only care about 2CV6s. They don't care about Dianes or Amis or anything. And that's because their family has always done 2CV6s. Their first car was a 2CV6, their second car was a 2CV6. It's what they feel strongly about. It's their religion. It literally goes that strongly. And I think that we all know people like this. People who are massively loving of one brand and one brand only, and that's what they do, or one model of one brand only. People who, only love 66 911s or 64, Mustangs or whatever. That's their religion. That's their mountain to stand on. And the third sort of enthusiast is what I would class myself as. I think the third sort of enthusiast is someone who likes the car for what it is today. So, for example, I love my 2CV. I love the fact that it's an ENAC. I love the fact that she's vert in brune. I love the wheels. I wanted this car and not another car. I didn't want a 2CV6. I didn't want an AMI 8. I wanted this exact car. But my interests go beyond just 2CVs. My interest in 2CVs is this car. And if I was to buy another car, it would be, there is another 2CV6 I would like, but I also like old British cars. I also like some old German stuff. I like pre-war French stuff. I like some American cars. I really like Studebakers, for example, and kind of really weird and wonderful pre-war American stuff. I love Ford Model A's, I love Ford Model T's. I really like Winnebago camper vans, like the super retro 1960s ones. I love them. I love all Jaguars. I love Aston Martins, Daimlers. I'm a very broad church, but I like those cars for what they mean today. I appreciate the history and I like to learn about the history, but that's not the reason to buy the car. I wouldn't buy a car just for the history. I would buy a car because I like to drive it and use it. I like it for the context of what it is today, not for a nostalgic context. And every single car club, I think, is made up of these people. But certain car clubs have certain concentrations of different amounts of these people. And so certain one-make car clubs, for example, so if it's a 2CV club, or it's a Jaguar club, or it's a Lancia club, you know, these clubs are usually populated by Type 1 and 2, and some of Type 3. You know, the people who love it for what they are today, like myself, are usually more prone to events and more prone to kind of mixed mark car clubs rather than mark specific car clubs, which I think is a massive shame. A lot of people who talk to me on social media about the way they feel about car clubs and their negative experiences with car clubs and their positive experiences with car clubs all said that one of their biggest problems with single make car clubs, they struggled with those car clubs because they felt judged. The people who ran the car clubs felt like sort of underappreciated masters of the history of the vehicles, and felt free to judge other people's cars, and made other people feel bad because their car wasn't perfect in the eyes of someone else. It can put people off from joining a club, and that's a huge shame, because actually car clubs are massively important. And it's very funny because a lot of people had a very odd relationship with the thought of car clubs in the first place. You know, they thought of them as kind of musty places of people who are trapped in the past, who are obsessed with one thing and one thing only, didn't want to share their passion with anybody else, weren't open, weren't the sort of person that you'd actually want to hang out with in the first place. And that's a shame as well, because car clubs are massively important. They serve a huge purpose in our classic car and in our modern car world. Because for classic cars, like, there are many classic car clubs that have parts programs, for example, so they can remake parts for our cars that we love so that we can keep them on the road. That's an absolutely amazing thing. They also allow you the opportunity to make new friends, to go to places that you wouldn't have gone before, to learn new things and new techniques. You know, many car clubs have members, like the MG Club, by the way. The MG Club from the Small Wonders video from Retromobile. There was a gentleman in that club that made crystal glass mascots for the radiators of cars, you know, like where your motor meter goes, like a Spirit of Ecstasy kind of thing. He actually made the frog that was on the MG. Like, that is an incredibly skilled person, and I actually have his information, so if anybody wants his information from that video, please let me know and I'll give it to you. But he's an incredibly skilled person, that his skills could be very helpful. You know, people who can do radiator repair, people who can do metal stitching. These are all art forms that keep vehicles alive, and there are people in car clubs that know these skills. And so being in a car club and being friends with these people and having the opportunity to maybe learn from these people is a huge deal. And putting up many people with many skills together in a club is a superb thing, because, like I say, it keeps the cars alive, it keeps the history alive, it keeps the passion alive, and like I say, it allows us to meet people, make friends, learn things, learn skills, you know, keep the cars alive. It's a hugely important thing, and to kind of miss out on that because somebody's not a very nice person, or to miss out on that because somebody's judgmental, that's actually reductive to the ethos of what a car club's supposed to be, you know? That's a huge shame. And I think one of the reasons for that negative aspect of car clubs is because a lot of car clubs are segregated. So they are on their own. They are a small community. And what happens when you have small communities is, especially when they are incredibly negative towards new people or people that think differently or anything like that, they become reverberation chambers. They become echo chambers. They just have the same conversations that go round and round and round, the same thoughts that go round and round and round, the same ethoses that go round and round and round. Nothing ever changes, except things get more serious, things get more negative, and things get more cliquey and more what's a better word for cliquey? More community, but in a negative way, the greater good, and that's a bad thing, and that's a shame. And I think there are 3 ways in which we can change that. The first of those ways is to join car clubs whether or not, because you'll always meet people in life that rub you the wrong way. There will always be someone, It's very funny. I have lived in many countries in the world, and people say, oh, people from this country are like this, and people from that country are like that, and kind of stereotypes do exist for a reason in some ways, but there are always exceptions to every rule, and there are amazing people in every country in the world, and there are absolute plebs in every country in the world. There are horrible people and there are lovely people, and there's a total mix. So the best way to make a change is to be the change we want to see in the world, and to join a car club whether or not. And if people judge us, we just say, well, it's a really good thing it's not your car, isn't it? A lot of people don't like the fact that I have bronze wheels on Jolene. A lot of people don't like the fact that I own this car at all. I get negative comments on some social medias and stuff like that, and that's okay. Everybody has a right to an opinion, but we have to remember that not everybody's opinion is correct, and not everybody's opinion is cared about, because I truly don't care if somebody doesn't like me or somebody doesn't like my car. If someone has legitimate criticism, if someone's like, well, you need to kind of do this because I've noticed this in one of your videos and that needs checking or something like that, this is leaking or something like that, I will always take on board criticism. I will always take on board people trying to help. If it comes from a really good place, I will always listen. Just like a few weeks ago, I had a video with bad sound. A couple of people who I know really care about this channel and want this channel to be the best it can be and love these videos told me the sound was wrong, and I sorted it. I re-uploaded the video. Yeah, the video was late, but whatever. That criticism came from a place of caring about my videos, wanting to help me, and I listened, But there is criticism for criticism's sake. And it's a good job it's not their car. Other people can do what they want with their cars. You do what you want with your car, but always respect the people, and hopefully other people will respect you, although they're not always going to. That's just life, and we just have to be grown-ups about it. The second way we can change it is actually from the club itself, from inside the club itself, because most clubs are democratic. Most clubs vote on things. And so what we can do is, by being part of a club and inviting your friends and kind of being a community and being community minded, we can sway the perceptions of a club. We can be friendly to people who weren't friendly with us, and we can change not necessarily people's mentalities, but we can be slightly educational towards them, and hopefully they'll have something to teach us as well. So that's another thing. The third thing that we can do is, as part of a car club, we can actually do events with other car clubs. So for example, if you're in the Riley Club, think about doing something with the MG Club, or think about doing something with the Salmson Club or the Austin 7 Club. If you're in the Mini Club, think about doing something with the Fiat 500 Club, because chances are you have a lot in common. Chances are that you will find common ground, you'll meet new friends, and it brings in new ideas, new thoughts, and new people. And there might be people who have a Mini and a Fiat 500. That's an amazing thing. And just remember that the way that a car club is perceived is also the way that the make is perceived. And there are, for example, when I was a kid, I've never had anything to do with Motor Guzzi in my life. I don't have a motorbike license. It's something that I want to get into the future. But I've never had anything to do with Motor Guzzi. My great uncle is a huge Motor Guzzi fan. If you're watching this, hello Uncle Ray. My great uncle is a huge Motor Guzzi fan. And he's had several. He's had Californias, he's had V7s, he's had all sorts. And he once went on a bike rally with my dad, a Motor Guzzi rally, to Scotland. And when they came back from Scotland, they went around Scotland on Motor Guzzis, they came back and everything they had to say about the club and about the event was about how nice everyone was, how supportive everyone was, how lovely everyone was. There were two guys that didn't even turn up on a Motor Guzzi. They turned up on like a 1920s Harley Davidson, if I remember, that was constant, with a constant loss oil system, who then proceeded to drive all the way around Scotland on it. And nobody batted an eyelid. And the fact is that my dad's memories from that event were of Motor Guzzis, but they were predominantly about how nice the community was. And so that made my dad want a Motor Guzzi. And years later, when people asked me what I thought of Motor Guzzis, my opinion was, I know very little about the bikes, I know about the engines, I know they're reliable, but my biggest takeaway from what I know of Motor Guzzis is how nice the community is and how supportive of the community, is. And I said this on Twitter. And out of the blue, the Motor Guzzi Club of Great Britain got in touch with me and thanked me for being so nice. And this is the thing. How nice you are and how nice your club is to other people can forever change people's perception of the thing that you drive, make them want to own one, and actually extend the family and extend how many people are loving and taking care of the mark which you have a passion for. I remember as a small child, I was in northern France, and the Ford GT40 club was in northern France, and I remember being a small child looking around these cars, and these guys are just like, yeah, touch it, whatever. And it forever made me love GT40s. I will always have a special place in my heart for those cars and those owners. And I've talked about this about shows before, the people who are kind to small children and kind of don't care about fingerprints, my favourite people in the world. Because that's what makes good stories. That's what makes passion. That's what keeps this alive. And another importance of car clubs is that, ZF, ZF, the gearbox company, ZF now make gearboxes for 8-year-old BMWs. They make replacement brand new gearboxes because BMW owners that own the really old BMWs and also some Bristols and ACAs and stuff like that use the same BMW architecture in those cars couldn't get gearboxes. And ZF stepped up and they went, don't worry, we will make a homologation spec gearbox that can be used in race cars, it can be used in Mille Miglia cars, it can be used in all these things. It's a replacement gearbox that is completely correct for the vehicle. And they did that because all the clubs got together, talked to ZF, ZF talked to them, and ZF could look at all these clubs together and they could make a business case. So someone at ZF went to their boss and said, I've got a really good idea, we can make a bunch of money, and they have done. And they've supplied a demand, but they've also made a bunch of money doing it. They didn't do it out of the kindness of their own heart. They did it because there's a business case, but they were able to make that business case because of club involvement. Equally, so some people had some quite negative things to say about Porsche clubs and about Porsche ownership and the fact that they would feel judged in a certain way if they owned a Porsche. Now, I really like 911s, I'll be honest with you. I would have an older 911 myself. But the one thing that I cannot put down about Porsche fanatics and about Porsche fans is the fact that their club involvement is superb. The way that Porsche still exists, and the clubs talk to the make, and the make talks to the clubs and responds, and that's why we have kind of retro spec 911s with wood gear knobs and houndstooth interiors and little ducktail spoilers, and I think that's kind of cute. It's a hint to the past, but it's also responding to a want from their community, and this is a huge point and a huge part of clubs, because as a club we can say, if we're individual people on forums and whatever, we don't have much of a voice. If we are clubs that are thousands of people strong, we can actually talk to car makes, we can talk to manufacturers, but more importantly, we can talk to our government. Because there are people out there who, because of monetary motivation, don't like old cars. Which is insane, because old cars exist. They're not hurting anybody, and they are far and away more ecological. It's more ecological to keep this car going than to buy a Tesla. It just is. It's a fact, right? But there are a lot of people out there who don't want us to drive our classic cars, who don't want us to be able to own our classic cars, who don't want us to be able to use or repair our classic cars. And rights to repair, so rights to modify vehicles, rights to repair vehicles yourself, rights to make your own parts that don't have a serial number on, etc., are hugely under attack in our modern world. In fact, in France, you may not know this, but in France you cannot modify cars at all. You cannot deviate from standard power, standard weight. You can't even alter the tyre size of the car. It has to be what was homologated originally with the vehicle. Electronic ignition is illegal. These little things that make a huge difference and make cars reliable are actually illegal to put on your own car, and it can completely render you without usable insurance, and it is insane. Putting a Weber on an MGB will make it illegal to use on the street, and if you have an accident, your insurance company would be legally within their right to completely null your insurance policy. That is insane. And the reason it is because the reason that we have no right to modify, the reason why we have no right to repair in France, is because a few years ago it happened all over Europe, and the European Union wanted to stop people modifying cars completely. Now, the question was raised in the UK, and in the UK the answer was met by the car clubs. The answer to the government's question was swiftly met by all the car clubs in Britain banding together and saying, we need to be able to fix our cars. We will not vote for you if we cannot fix our cars. This is stupid what you're saying. Because not being able to modify your car means, using brake pads with asbestos in them. It's using fuel line that isn't ethanol safe. It means doing things that would be utterly stupid, because after all, that's technically a modification. Where do you draw the line of what a modification is and what a modification isn't? And the fuel that we now run our vehicles on has changed massively. If you own a 1960s car, obviously you might want to put hardened valve seats in your car so you can run it on unleaded fuel. You may want to raise the compression so that the car actually burns the fuel efficiently. You might not want to use Chinese-made points, and you may actually want to use a European-made electronic ignition system, because it keeps the car working properly as it should do. This would be completely illegal in France, but in Britain all the car clubs united stood up together and said to the government, we need right to repair. In France that didn't happen, and because of that, because the car clubs didn't stand up and say, look, people's jobs, people's livelihoods, the way that some people feed their children is fixing these cars, is modifying these cars. Instead of that, people were divided. Modified car people were over here, standard, the purists were over here. The purists didn't understand that, the modified car people were actually on their side. And it's absurd. Because the cliquier we get as a car community, the more we get torn apart, and the less of a future there is for classic vehicles, and the less of a future there is for our cars, you know. For example, a while ago, Porsche said that they were going to make an electric vehicle, and the Porsche community said, well, it better be bloody good. And you know what? The Taycan, whatever you want to call it, it's hideously expensive, but it is one of the best, well, the best electric car ever made thus far, if you don't count the little Zagato electric from the 1970s, and of course milk floats, because, let's face it, they did a damn good job. But Jaguar, on the other hand, have just released an electric concept vehicle that it looks like a printer with wheels on. It's hideous and it's awful and it's not Jaguar. You know, there's no grace, space and pace in that thing. It's an uninspired, undesigned, just horrific mess of a vehicle. And so the Jaguar Car Club will no doubt say to Jaguar, "What are you doing, man?" You know, and then Jaguar hopefully will respond in kind by making something that's good. This is important. You know, we now have Jaguar Heritage, which is superb. We now have BMW Heritage, which is superb. These are the make itself, making original parts, and that's a fantastic thing. There are also car companies out there making fixes for problems that existed in the past. You know, it's an original equipment part and it fixes the problem. Is it legal? I don't know. Is it homologated? I don't know, in France. And this is one of the problems, you know. It puts you in a very awkward position where you don't know what's legal, you don't know what is legal, you don't know what to do. And we need to rectify this. We need to be car clubs. We need to create car clubs. We need to resurrect car clubs. We need to be united, not just in one make car clubs, but in multiple make car clubs, between multiple make car clubs, between multiple one make car clubs, you know. It allows us to keep these vehicles alive. It allows us to keep these vehicles going, and it allows us to keep history alive. We currently stand at a point in the world where a lot of brass era cars, that stuff from the 1910s and backwards, a lot of early stuff, a lot of kind of London to Brighton run vehicles are going unsold. You know, they're for sale for months and years and eventually get given to museums, and that's okay until people stop going to the museums because they don't care about the cars. How do we prevent that? We prevent that by driving the cars. To everyone who doesn't like cars driven, it doesn't matter. We have to drive them because we have to have them visible. You know, I have a connection to the GT40 because I walked around one as a small child and some dude said, "Get in it." I love 2CVs because of how warm and lovely people were. The Spridget Car Club, I talked to the Spridget Car Club and they were so warm and lovely and nice at the Paris show that actually now my fiance wants a Frog Ice Sprite. That because of the community around them. One, because it's adorable, but two, because the people behind them were absolutely lovely. You know, the Amel Car Club said to me, "Look, you're really tall. We don't know if you fit in an Amel car well. We don't want you to buy one and not be satisfied with it. We like to know where the cars are and we like to maintain the history of the vehicles. So if you would like to buy one, we'll invite you out. You can drive one of our cars, see how you get on with it and see how it fits you." Communities like that are so wonderful deserve support. They deserve support between communities. They deserve support from governments. Not necessarily monetary support, but they deserve to be listened to. And they deserve to be listened to by us. And they deserve to be supported. Car clubs that aren't supportive, that aren't nice, that aren't welcoming, frankly, the clubs deserve to die and be replaced by people who have passion and who have support for these people and who have support for these clubs and have support for these cars and who are open to people who actually care. That's my belief. You know, I believe that car clubs are one of the most important things in our classic car world. I believe they're important for the environment. For example, obviously, if you make a car more efficient, if I make Jolene more efficient so that she burns fuel better than she did in 1963, by, for example, putting fuel injection on her, she would do 100 miles to the gallon, I have no doubt. can't do that because that's the law. I can put a fuel injection kit on my car without cutting it, without welding it, and a kit that can be removed at any point and the carburetor can be put back on. Can't do it because the law is against it. But it would make my car better for the environment. Not allowing right to repair doesn't help anybody. And the car clubs, or the members of the car clubs, who sit back and go, well, I'm a purist and I wish everything to remain standard forever and I don't want anything to change ever. The fact is that our world changes, that our political world changes, that our fuel changes, that our climates change. You know, waterless coolant is a really good thing because it stops your engine blowing up. It keeps that standard engine standard. You know, an electric fan is a fantastic thing because it stops the engine blowing. It protects that original engine. We aren't a community if we don't stand together, if we don't reproduce parts for our cars, if we don't fight for a right to repair, if we don't fight for our rights to drive. You know, there's an association called the Human Driving Association, which was started by Alex Roy, the gentleman who used to own the record for driving. He still owns the record for driving a Morgan across America, a three-wheeled Morgan. He used to hold the record for driving a car across America. But Alex Roy has an association called the Human Driving Association that wants to fight for people's rights to drive their own cars. Because, you know, autonomous cars aren't going to be happening very soon, but they are a thing that will eventually happen. And there are people who want us to be confined to mushy little boxes because there are people who don't believe that humans are safe to drive, which is absurd because humans are better than any computer at driving. Driving is a very complicated and very difficult task that humans just happen to be very, very good at. Well, humans who are well educated, who are, you know, who like driving. And so we have to, as people who love driving, we have to fight for better driver education. We have to fight for rights to repair. We have to fight for the rights to drive our own vehicles. We have to, you know, we have to fight for the rights to drive our classic cars and for the events that exist to still exist. And all of this requires being united. It requires being a community. It requires being a club. It requires being lots of clubs that stand together and become an association. And so, if you have thoughts on this, if you have thoughts on what I've said in this video, please let me know down in the comments below. You know, I truly believe that it doesn't matter what we drive as long as we have passion for it. And I think that, you know, hot rod people and classic car people, pretty much the same people. You know, people who are purists are very similar to modified purists. I know modified car, like historical modified car people who like modified cars of a certain decade, you know, Redwood and all that kind of thing. And so, you know, we should all be able to bond over this stuff. We should all be able to find common ground over this stuff. And to people who don't want other people driving their cars, people who don't want, you know, young people to drive their cars, well, I hope there are people out there who do. Otherwise, that mark of car is dead, and that mark of car has no future, and that makes me truly sad. So, if you are out there and you have a car club, let me know about it. Speaking of which, we now have the Oliver Pickard fan community on Facebook. So, if you are a car club, feel free to join our fan community as a car club. Feel free to join it as an individual. If you are a person with particular skills, so if you do radiator repair, I want to know. If you're a panel beater who makes body panels, I want to know. If you make glass bonnet ornaments, I want to know. I would love our community to be a well-educated group of very open people that people can come to and ask the questions that they are afraid to ask in other places. You know, often people are afraid to ask questions because they think that it might make them look stupid. I want my fan community, I want my community on Facebook to be a place where people can come and ask the things that they're afraid to ask in other places, not be ridiculed, but be supported. If you have a project, I want to know about it. It doesn't have to be a car, it can be a house, it can be a moped, it can be a bicycle. as long as you have passion. Because that's what I'm about. That's what this YouTube channel is about. This YouTube channel is about passion. It's about bringing people together through our connected passions. You know, that's what I've always wanted to show with this camera. And with that, I will ask you all to please, I don't need to ask you to be awesome to each other. You know you need to be awesome to each other, and you will be awesome to each other. So please be awesome to each other. And I'll see you all in the next video. Bye bye.